Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I wish I could stay. Unfortunately, I have to leave this afternoon for a board meeting. Some of you are familiar with CALE, and I'll have to leave for that. Wow, standing room only. It's intimidating. Actually, when I was a little kid, I thought it would be great to be a priest. And the reason was Father Doherty on Sunday morning at the Children's Mass stood up there and preached and had everybody's attention, mainly because there was a nun at the end of the row for the kids, and you dared not pay attention. But that illusion of standing up in front of everyone and having their attention is what attracted me. A few years later, a couple things happened. One, I got expelled from Catholic school. At about the same time, I learned that there were vows of chastity and poverty, so it didn't work. But here I am standing up in front of, hopefully, a more attentive audience than we were. I'm going to set the timer on my, gotta find that. Gotta hit the right button first. Set the timer so I can hopefully stay pretty much on schedule for you. But it reminds me of another story of growing up a Catholic. Catholic takes a non-Catholic to a Mass for the first time ever. And when they come in, the Catholic dips his hand in holy water and blesses himself. And the non-Catholic, being a very curious academic, said, what's that about? And the Catholic explains that the water has been blessed and the sign of the cross is the sign of the Trinity, very important to Christianity. And then the Catholic goes up and genuflects before he gets in the pew, and the non-Catholic says, why'd you do that? And the Catholic explains that that recognizes Christ's presence on the altar. And as the Mass unfolds, the non-Catholic keeps asking questions, and the Catholic keeps patiently answering the questions. And then it comes time for the homily, and the priest would have taken off his watch, not used his iPhone, and put it up like that. And the non-Catholic said, what does that mean? And the Catholic said in disgust, not a damn thing. So, I want to start with a story, and I'm going to tell some of St. Leo's story, but I want to start with another story. And it goes back to 1972. In 1972, anybody remember Sandy Astin, Alexander Astin's book, The Invisible College? It was written, you got to be old like me, it was written back then, and it was because there was a real threat to small private colleges. But this story isn't about what we would regard today as a small private college. But it was a college with declining enrollment, mounting deficits, and in the summer of 1972, cash flow problems. And the cash flow problems were such that there was an emergency meeting of the Board of Trustees, and the trustees did what trustees are supposed to do. They dug in their pockets and they wrote checks to cover the cash flow needs for that summer. But they made some other decisions. They needed a leadership change, and they needed to do something that in the history of the institution had been resisted. They needed to go co-ed, a dramatic change. That institution is Boston College, with a $1.6 billion endowment today, a 29% acceptance rate on 34,000 applications for about 2,200, let me check my notes here to get it right. Where is it? 2,250 freshmen, SATs, or 2,400 scale of 2020. Now, okay, it's 41 years later. But what was happening at other institutions' campuses in 1972? Particularly the smaller private institutions. A lot that were single-sex did go co-ed. They adopted that strategy. But they did other things back in that era. Things that were unthinkable 10 or 15 years earlier, and co-education would have been unthinkable for decades in many of those places, both all-male, as BC was, and all-female. But what emerged? Weekend programs, adult education programs in the evening, professional programs in pure liberal arts colleges, oh my God. Innovation for survival. So fast forward to today, and things don't feel to us any better than I'm sure they felt to those institutions back in 1972. We are getting assaulted from every direction by forces of demography, economics, technology, globalization, criticism, on and on and on and on. And if you noticed Moody's response when Paul Smith's college closed in Virginia, to expect more of it. It's not a fun time, but you can be overwhelmed and feel like it's a tsunami, or perhaps you can ride the wave. It will be exciting. It will be exhilarating. There will be significant risks. But if you survive the wave, there will be great rewards and excitement as well. I just put this up here for trajectory. These are lines of our enrollment. On the bottom is our traditional campus enrollment, and the enrollment scale is on the left, the financial scales are on the right, and our graduate enrollments, our total enrollment, and probably the best lines of all are annual revenues and our accumulated net assets. And that's since 1997. Everything starts in my world at St. Leo in 1997 because that's when I got there. A little about us. We're a complex institution. We have multiple locations. Actually, we teach, it changes almost every term, and we do 6 8-week terms, except on campus and for a few other things, but approximately teach in 45 physical locations in 7 states, on military bases, what we call civilian locations, which are actually community college, state college in Florida campuses, the old community colleges, but now most of them are offering bachelor's degrees. What we call standalone locations, office park locations, generally near where we have other facilities, but not exclusively. We have 2 on-site corporate relationships where we are physically located inside the corporation. In January, we had just shy of 16,000 students. VTT is video teaching technology. All of our locations, with only a couple exceptions on community college campuses where they haven't allowed it, are linked with what we call video teaching technology that we use to deliver instruction. We had 209 blended courses. We had 5,910 online sections this year, and 77,732 enrollments. That's a single student registering for a single online class. You can see our programs, but it's a sprawling, pretty complicated place. These are our kind of major physical locations, from Key West, Florida, north to Richmond, Virginia, west to San Diego, California. But it wasn't always so. This is from 1989 to 1997. The yellow line, the lower line, anybody else colorblind? They have to tell me what color the line is so I can tell you what color the line is. The yellow line was our traditional campus enrollment. That had declined in that period from roughly 1,100 down to about 700. And the upper line was everything else. That dip in the upper line was the first Gulf War, by the way, our military students. Since then, you can see the trajectory much better. That dip in all the other military, civilian, online, and so forth, that was in 2008 when we decided to take all of our online program operations, marketing, everything in-house. And we knew we'd take a hit, but felt we would be better off in the long term given our size and so forth. Revenues in brown, if you will, and net assets in blue during that 89 to 97 period and since. This is to establish my credibility, if you hadn't noticed. But where did we begin? Literally, it was a mess. Every roof leaked on campus. The average age of the air conditioning was 37 years old. It had a life expectancy of 20 years. Those of you from Wisconsin and Minnesota, you need heat. In Florida, you need air conditioning. And it was all on the verge of collapse. That looked like the phone in my office when I walked in the door on January 2nd, 1997. I kid you not. I'm on the first floor. If I threw it out the window, it would have broken the concrete sidewalk. And no faculty had institutionally provided computers. We had 2 batch processing systems, one off campus, one on campus, which reflects institutional dysfunction, frankly, neither of which were adequate and worked, and they didn't integrate. By the way, when I turned my computer on, MS-DOS came up. I panicked. I absolutely panicked. I didn't remember a single keystroke from the days of MS-DOS. Now, imagine yourself, here you are, I'm brought in, everybody knows the place is in deep trouble, and guess what I say? We're going online. We don't have computers. We're going online. So they thought they had an absolute crazy person. This is an aerial view of the campus in 1998 when we started master planning. This is since, and as David mentioned, we've built 11 buildings. We're completing our 12th. We're planning our 13th. And we went from what a consultant that we used didn't tell me at the time. Years later, when we looked more like we do today, he said, you know, when I first came here, it was like going to a school in a third world country. Now I've had 3 people in higher education in the last 6 months who visited the campus for the first time said, wow, this is almost like a mini Stanford, because we've done everything in Spanish Mission and red roofs and so forth. Well, how did we get from there to where we are today? One aspect, just one, is strategy. Any other Dilbert fans out there? Well, I love Dilbert because there's always an element of real truth. And you probably can't read it from the back, certainly. The pointy-headed boss says to Dilbert, is your plan consistent with our corporate strategy? And Dilbert says, how would I know? And he said, the pointy-headed boss, don't you know what our strategy is? And Dilbert says, no, do you? And he says, of course I do. It's something about leveraging our platforms. And so the pointy-headed boss says to Dilbert, does your plan leverage our platforms? And Dilbert says, no, but I can rewrite it so it seems that it does. And the pointy-headed boss says, good, go back and do that. There's no reason, there's no point in having a strategy if you aren't going to pretend to follow it. Now, I taught strategic planning out at the Snowmass Institute. Are any of my former students out there? Yeah, see? I hope I was halfway decent and didn't discourage you from coming. But one of the things I discovered, I did that for 16 years, is that most institutions, if they thought they had a strategic plan, the problem was there was no strategy. So I'd like you to just take 30 seconds, turn to the person nearest you, if they're not at the same institution, maybe even if they are, and tell them what your institution's grand strategy is. All right. It shouldn't take that long, but I was curious. Why was there so much laughter at first? How many could articulate in a sentence or two what the grand strategy of their institution was? Oh, we got a couple hands. Good for you. How many just pretend that there is and pretend to follow it, or how many? Never mind. Sun Tzu. Strategy is the great work of the organizations. In situations of life or death, it is the Tao of survival or extinction. Its study cannot be neglected. Interestingly, I had the Chief of Staff of Southern Command on my campus last week, and he quoted that to me. The military is still very clear that Sun Tzu had a great deal to say about how do you handle situations of life and death, because they do. I drew this in stick figures back probably around 1998 for my board, and said, you know, in the hierarchy of higher education, first, you know, you got the Ivies, but let's just focus on 235 schools, the Catholic universities. And if we had a ladder, and we envisioned it, Notre Dame would be at the top. And then maybe Georgetown, then maybe Boston College, remember where they were. But you know, you could argue who comes next, Villanova, St. Louis, Dayton, San Diego, whatever. But I said, you know, frankly, confront the brutal facts. Down on the first or second rung of the ladder was St. Leo University at the time. I said, no matter how good we are, no matter how fast we climb, no matter how much we succeed, we're never getting to the top of that ladder. That's the cold, hard, brutal truth. Because they're not standing still. Around 2000, Monk Malloy, who was president of Notre Dame, was our commencement speaker, and I said, Monsignor, what's your biggest challenge? He said, money. Got to raise another $1 billion for the endowment. That's with a B. Well, they weren't standing still. They still aren't. So I said, we got to build a new ladder. That's Fritz. He's our mascot, as well known, I'm sure, as the leprechaun. So here's the grand strategy we laid out. Be aggressive, innovative, entrepreneurial, and agile. Invent the private not-for-profit university of the 21st century. And that's the strategy that we've been working towards. Now, how do you craft a strategy? Or where did that particular strategy come from? And other strategies? Well, what we care about as an institution, what our competitors care about, different stuff, what our students care about, and the intersection where what we care about and what our students care about, but our competitors do not, was where we crafted the strategy. Hey, Notre Dame in 1997-98 didn't really care about the adult student. Didn't really, online? You gotta be kidding me. Many of you didn't then. But we had military students. Remember that dip back in 1991? I mentioned Desert Storm. Well, then, when they deployed 500,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard into the Gulf, we couldn't go with them. And they sat over there for 6 months. Susan, your school probably did go with them, but we couldn't. We took a tremendous hit. Say, we ain't doing that anymore. We got to go with them. How can we go with them? Online. Most recent wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, at times we had over 1,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard prosecuting the war and continuing to study online with us at the same time. That part of our market and our adult ed market, they cared about that kind of access and convenience. And not enough people did, so we crafted our strategy around it, and it's worked. But it's much more than strategy. It starts with your mission, being really clear who you are. And again, that Snowmass experience taught me, or maybe reinforced for me, that too many of our mission statements, all we have to do is substitute the names of the schools, and everything else pretty much sounds the same. But it's more than what's in the statement. It's what people believe and feel and get up in the morning to go to work to accomplish with some enthusiasm and excitement. My first 9 months, we spent 8 of it on the mission. Now, could have written the mission statement in an hour one afternoon, but we talked about it. We did surveys. We had focus groups because I wanted everybody focused on why are we here in the first place? Let's be real clear about that because we had lost that clarity. Then, values. And I put together another group and said, at our very best, which was hard to find, at our very best, what are the values at play? And once we identified them, community, respect for all people, responsible stewardship, excellence, personal development, and integrity, we define them as behavioral expectations of everyone. We hire based on those values, we evaluate based on those values, we fire based on those values. Statistically, the winningest coach in St. Leo University history, and we have very strong athletics, was fired for a violation of the core value of respect. And that wasn't the only person over the years. It's not only about being competent in your jobs, you have to do it consistent with those core values. Then, vision and planning. I invite you to go on St. Leo's website. You can find Vision 2017, which replaced Vision 2013. That may be somewhere there, I don't know, which replaced Vision 2010. It is written in the present tense as if it's 2017, and it says, if all our hopes and dreams come true, this is the best case scenario of what we will look like. And then we have plans. We have business plans for our graduate programs, for our Center for Online Learning, which is undergraduate, full degree online programs, for our continuing education centers, for our campus, for our standalone centers. We roll up the business plans into a 5-year financial plan. We have master plans, we have marketing plans, we have technology plans. We have an athletic strategic plan, and I could go on. But the biggest piece, I think, ultimately, where too much of higher education fails, is accountability for execution of those plans. And I tell our folks all the time, and you should read the book Execution by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. Execution, the process really comes out of GE under Jack Welch. But I tell our people all the time that our ability to execute is a significant, significant competitive advantage. And in the book, it talks about, they interview one executive, and he refers to it as promises kept. If I say I'm going to do something, then I do it. If it's going to be done by Friday, it is done by Friday. And we hold people to that. One of my favorite quotes, Vision without action is merely a dream. Action without vision just passes the time. Vision with action can change the world. There are more potential students today. There's greater need for higher education, and there's the greatest demand. Now, enrollments are falling, but the demand is still there. If you read some of the studies, we're going to be short millions of people with bachelor's degrees within the next decade to meet the needs of the workforce. So why do we all look like that? There's a lot of opportunity here. But we have some problems. 1974, a 19-inch Sony color TV, $590. I hope no one from Benetton College is here, but I picked on them because they used to be the most expensive for tuition. And their tuition was $6,280. Here we are in 2013. Benetton College's tuition is $44,490, and you can buy that 19-inch LCD HD TV with DVD player for $177.80. Benetton College's tuition has gone up 608%, and the TV's price has gone down 70%, and you get the DVD. Now, you can say, oh, well, it's different. That's TVs, and we're higher education. The consumer gets trained in terms of expectations. And they've reached a point where they're saying, what the heck? Why is this costing so much? And maybe with good reason. Demographics. That top line, Caucasian students. These are public high school graduates between now and 2022. Next decade. Caucasian high school graduates from public schools declined by 14.5%. Black, the darkest line, they declined by 9.5%. And Hispanic, the line with the ascendancy, increases 62.5%. Habla español? How many of you in your institutions have Spanish-speaking people in your admissions department, your financial aid department, your registrar's office, student activities, security? How many have bilingual? What one of those ethnic groups now has, and I tipped you off, now has the highest college-going rate? Hispanic and Latino. Just a couple percentage points more than Caucasian. Demographic changes. In 2006, and I'll talk a little bit about our planning process and key result areas, which I talked about a little on the blog. We had one that, and we named them all, La Familia. How do we prepare ourselves for this? And we started making certain we had bilingual people in all of those departments and that other people could speak a little Spanish and say, un momento, por favor, and put the person who really spoke Spanish on the line to deal with the parent. We researched their wants and needs and started preparing ourselves. At the time, about 9% of our student body was Hispanic and Latino. Now it's over 20%. And year-to-year increase in freshmen, 14.5% increase in Hispanic and Latino enrolling this fall over last fall. Now, hey, we're Catholic, we're in Florida. This wasn't rocket science. But you need to be thinking about these things and executing a strategy. We heard about Georgia Tech, a MOOC-like online master's degree at low cost. And the second headline, which would be a degree of cost cutting, St. Petersburg College says it can offer a 4-year degree program for total tuition of $10,000. That's not a year. That's the cost, not the cost. That's the tuition cost for the student. That's dangerous competition for us. Clayton Christensen, if you haven't heard him speak at a conference, go on YouTube and watch him lecture on disruptive education. The guy's masterful. The timer on my watch is better because my cell phone shuts down if I'm not. But the guy is masterful about it. And I'm not going to explain it all, but I'll use an example that he uses all the time about the steel industry. There are basically 4 major types of steel. And they're huge integrated mills, U.S. Steel, Bethlehem Steel, so forth, and they made all of them. And to build a fully integrated, according to Clay, integrated steel mill today would cost $8 billion. So back in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, not sure when, mini mills were invented. And what they did was they melted down scrap steel, and then they could produce something else. But the quality of that something else was really lousy. But they had something, the cost of entry dropped way down. So the mini mills started making rebar, the lowest level, reinforcing bar for concrete. Once you put it in, they cover it with concrete. If it's crap, nobody knows anyway. And the margins were only 7%, and the mini mills had a 20% advantage in terms of the cost of producing it. So they all started making rebar. So the U.S. Steels and the Bethlehem said, well, it's only got a 7% margin and it's crap anyway. Let's just get out of that business. Let them have it. Well, an interesting thing happened, and this is how it was Clayton Christensen's research. Once all the integrated mills got out of the business, the price of rebar plummeted, because to have a low-cost product, you have to have somebody selling the same thing, more or less, at a high cost. And once everybody got out, it was just a commodity, and then the bottom fell out. But up until that point, the mini mills were making money, and the integrated mills were making more money, because they were concentrating. So what did the mini mills do? Well, we got to do something else. So let's go after the angle iron. So they improved their stuff, and they went after the angle iron. And what did the integrated mills do? Well, we'll get out of that business too, because the margins aren't nearly as much as it is on the steel girders and the sheet metal, and we'll concentrate on that. And the mini mills just moved up market until, and of course the same thing happened once they got in to the angle iron and the last integrated mill got out, prices collapsed, forced them to go up market again. And so it went until every integrated mill, save one, went bankrupt. And now mini mills have 60% of the steel market. Part of the reason is that this innovation was cheap, wasn't as good, but the customers didn't care. It's kind of what we argue about online, don't we? Well, it's nowhere near as good as what we do. Who would want that anyway? And besides, maybe we can't make money there, so we'll just ignore that and rake in the money from our campuses. Hello, I don't think anybody's raking in the money from our campuses. I did not create this slide. I went to a meeting, and somebody who I knew a little from distance put it up, and I said, really? Because we are doing R&D on MOOCs. We have an idea about a MOOC. I'm going to talk about MOOC strategy, but somebody thought we were doing it. MOOCs are now, you want to talk about cheap, free to the customer. Sort of, almost. Not free. There are costs, but not to the customer by and large yet. And they have problems. They're starting to monetize them, but nobody's making money. But you know those private equity firms and venture capitalists and individual investors that are backing some of these? They are not in it for the grand public good. They see dollar signs. And these are smart people. Credentialing, badges, accreditation, credits for courses, we see that starting to happen around the country in bits and pieces. Course completion rates are dismal. I was saying coming in, if you're not a really accomplished learner, the current generation of MOOCs aren't going to help you. But these are MOOCs 1.0. And 2.0 and 3.0 and 3.1 are coming, and it will be different and will be better. And then the student authentication issues. Now, why a MOOC? Brand expansion. And I'll tell a brief story about that. Lead development. I put my watch up here. I got everything up here now. Course and faculty enhancement. Antioch, as an example, you get people like Sebastian Troon and so forth, and research and development. And the last is the one that I find most intriguing and potentially, to me, most threatening. Because if you have 100,000 students and you deliver an online course, and you gather all the data about what learning activities really worked and what ones didn't, and why, that's powerful. How many times and over how many years will we have to offer one course to gather data from 100,000 students to figure that out? All of us will be pointed straight up by the time we do that. We're just not big enough. That's, I think, the greatest potential power of MOOCs 1.0. But this is a McKinsey & Company study of the sector's position for greatest gains from the use of big data. And educational services is on the negative side. Now, I saw in the program that there's a session on market analytics and so forth, and we in higher education need to be doing a lot more of that. We have to start capturing that big data and using it. But we met the enemy, and it is us. This slide, based on the Babson survey supported by the Sloan Foundation, says that according to faculty, 30.1% say online is inferior, 35.6% say it's somewhat inferior to face-to-face instruction. So 2/3 nationwide of our faculty still says it's rebar. And we don't do rebar. We do the good stuff, the sheet steel. That's who we are. Anyone know about Dr. Eric Mazur's study? It's really cool. I kind of picture students with 21st century beanies or something. He was able, with some technology, to measure students' brain waves 24/7 for a week. And this is what he found. That's class time on the right. That's TV on the left. The brain waves are remarkably similar. This is Harvard, by the way, where we think they have great lecturers, at least some of them. And in the middle is sleep. Their brains were about 5 times more active when they were sleeping than when they were in class. Anybody know who that is? His name is Mark Edmondson. He's a professor at the University of Virginia, and he wrote a very impassioned op-ed piece, just about a year ago, I guess, about how the lecture is the best way to teach, and this online stuff is nonsense. And this was at the time that UVA had restored Teresa Sullivan to the presidency, and about 3 weeks later, they said, guess what, we're signing on with edX or Coursera, I forget which, and we're going to do MOOCs. Well, a few months earlier, I had a conversation with some people from the University of Pennsylvania and some others from Columbia University, and I said, why are you guys getting involved in MOOCs? And they said, oh, it's very simple. It gets board members and alumni who are always asking, why aren't we doing something about online, off our backs? Didn't have to be vetted through the governance process. Nobody has to play if they don't want to. So we're doing something, and if something good happens, fine, but otherwise, who cares? And then University of Virginia, Teresa Sullivan got in trouble because she wasn't strategically bold enough. Her strategy was too incremental. They signed on with Coursera. She got everybody off her back, and hopefully she's doing well. But Mark says the lecture is the superior way. Well, do you really think Ferris Bueller wants to listen to Mark or anybody else? Or that he was better served, he would have been better served sitting in lectures that day than going on his adventure throughout the city of Chicago. Any other Ferris Bueller fans? I love them. And all the research says, no, Mark, you're not right, whether it's brain research or learning theory. Things take longer to happen than you think they will, and then they happen faster than you think they can. Larry Summers. It's real interesting, but I think very, very true. Now these two are very interesting from the same person. I don't care. I don't think we can charge that much for tuition in the future, and it's a big pressure point for us. I don't think we can charge that much for tuition. Over the next 5 years, and these were taken a little out of context, the quality online will improve. 90% of these courses, MOOCs, will be long forgotten and never viewed. Over the next 5 years, this transformation will be phenomenal, but only through a pretty brutal winnowing out process. And that's the president of MIT. And he doesn't think that they can charge as much as they're charging. What does that say for us? It's more than just courses, and your program covers that, but you need to understand that, and you also need to understand you're digital or you're Amish. Hey, that's the world in which we live. I know, I have a home in upstate New York, and they're Mennonites, but they're digital too. When I talked about execution, when I found this quote from Thomas Edison, "Vision without execution is hallucination," I was so excited, I have to tell you, because I preach execution, execution, execution. But I'm from New Jersey originally. That's Bruce Springsteen. I started following Bruce Springsteen when he was in a band called Steel Mill. That's how far back I go. And From the River, is a dream a lie if it doesn't come true, or is it something worse? And the reason I put that up is if you say you're going to do something, and you say it's going to make a change, and you do not execute, it is worse than a lie. And the next time you come around and say, okay, we're going to do this, and it's going to change this, and things are going to get better, people just aren't going to believe you. Been there, done that. I know how this ends, not interested. This is, according to Kirk, the anthropology is more threatening than the economics. I said that from the day I got to St. Leo. The dysfunction, that was our strategic alignment. And that's all too typical of most colleges and universities. Everybody going in their own direction. And there's a whole talk about the autonomy of the faculty and the intrinsic versus the extrinsic and so forth. But that's what can happen. And so, we say we need to do this, and Mark Edmondson and others go in the opposite direction and say basically, like hell, I don't have to, I'm not going to. And too often, we let those people block us. And it takes some real backbone to say we're going to do it and we're going to put the resources behind it. Jeffrey Pfeiffer basically says for higher ed institutions, people have to buy into the strategy if you're going to be effectively competitive. And with anthropology like that, organizational alignment like that, you don't have the buy-in. That's one of the great challenges. What does that represent to people? Anyone? The Yankees payroll over 4 years, from 2008 to 2012, $1.017 billion. They won 479 games. It cost them $2.1 million to win a game. Interesting. The Red Sox didn't spend quite as much, but that's a pretty hefty payroll for 25, 30 guys or so. You know, anybody want one of their salaries? They won 438 games, 41 fewer than the Yankees. So what's the point? Tampa Bay Rays, $283 million payroll. They won 458 games, cost them $600,000 a game. Which of those three teams won 2 of the 4 American League East pennants? That's my warning. It does work when it... the Rays did. What's the point? It's not about resources, people. It's about how resourceful you are. If the Rays looked at the Yankees payroll and said, oh my God, we can never spend that much money. We're a small market. You know, they don't draw flies. You know, it's hopeless. There's nothing we can do. Well, there would be nothing that they could do. What they said was, we got to figure out a strategy of how we can win with a payroll a fraction of the size of everyone else. And they have, and so can you. Peter Drucker, the point of this is budgeting. Drucker talks about most businesses have a budget. When times are good, the budget grows. When times are bad, you cut it. So you do that, you miss the future. You need 2 budgets. You need the ordinary, business as usual, operating budget, however you want to describe it. And indeed, when the business cycle is down, you need to cut it. But then you need a future budget where you invest in the future, and whether things are good or bad, you don't cut the future budget. He goes on to say, in the normal operating budget, you ask the question, what is the minimal amount of resources we need to do this job? And that's how you fund that. And in the future budget, what are the optimal amount of resources we need to get this started, to get this done? And that's how you fund that. In 1997-98, my first full fiscal and academic year, I scratched and clawed and stole $600,000 out of a $25 million budget, $26 million budget. $600,000. Every roof's leaking, lousy technology, on and on. I told the story. And invested it in developing online programs. We brought in a whopping $88,000 in revenue. Do the math. Lost over $500,000. Eked out a little surplus. I had a board, a bunch of 60, 70-year-old men who didn't even, by and large, there were a few women, didn't even use email, some of them. And I'm online, here we go. We just lost $500,000. I had a 3-year contract, so. So I said, trust me. You saw that slide before, 77,000 plus enrollments. You know, round number, $1,000 per, $77 million in online tuition revenue last year. That's $600,000 was our future budget that year. Every year we follow that discipline. La Familia, I talked about before, that was a strategic initiative that got all the money it needed to position us to where we are today. And eventually some of it gets folded in as business as usual. Some stuff you do, you're done, you move on. But Peter Drucker knows what it takes. If you're going to do it, you got to go all in. I don't know most of your institutions. It's not a comment on any of them, but what I've observed over the last 10 years is a lot of schools dipping their toes in the water. Let's just see how it feels. You know, we'll go in little by little by little by little. It's not going to work, people. You need to align the institution and go all in. And I submit to you, if you have adult students, if you have continuing ed programs, you better get there fast. Because in onesies and twosies, we're taking your market share by having it if you do not. You know, I have execution meetings. If you read the book, you'll know what they are. But everybody, starting with me, accounts. I have about 20 people, all the vice presidents, deans, several associate vice presidents, the athletic director, go off campus whole day, stand up. We have objectives. I write mine first. I've written mine. My vice presidents have now written theirs. I've signed off. Their people are writing theirs now. My group stand up. I account 3 times a year. This is where we said we'd be. This is where we are on these key objectives. And everybody in turn does that. And we talk about it. And so forth, and then their direct reports do it to their vice president and so forth. I always wear black because, you know, when I say we were going to have an execution meeting, everybody was wondering which one of us is getting executed. And now everybody wears black. But it has to be part of the organization's culture. And the best people on our campuses about planning, about real analytics, about evaluation and execution are our coaches. Because we can all see whether they win or lose, and even at Division III now, if you don't win, you're generally gone after a while. They understand execution and accountability. All of us need to understand execution and accountability. Where have we been since the Great Recession? And again, I pointed out that dip. We decided to go independent and we decided earlier, but we went completely independent online May of 2008. Great timing. Bear Stearns had gone belly up on St. Patrick's Day in March. Lehman Brothers was a couple months out. So at the beginning of the Great Recession, although most of us were not conscious of it, we went completely independent after 10 years of having a provider. Not one as good as Learning House. I have to say nice things about my house. No, I'm serious about that. But we never would have gotten where we were in 2008 if we didn't have a partner like Learning House with know-how and capital and so on and so forth. Could never have done it. But we reached a point where we could and decided that we would. We go fly solo, which was our metaphor for it, in 2008, because we were talking about building the airplane as we flew it. Here are our revenues. Then, 2013, this is through the Great Recession. Revenues grew 46%, the endowment 395%, net assets 139%, more than doubled our net worth. Full-time faculty, we added 102 full-time faculty. Average faculty salary increased 17.2% in that period of time, and enrollment grew 23%. All in, people, all in. We couldn't sort of go halfway when we went, and we kind of won that bet. Another good book I would submit to you is Leading Change. Increase the sense of urgency. If you don't have a sense of urgency now, I'm not sure when you will. Build the guiding team. You know, when I started in 97, I didn't have a lot of people saying, oh yeah, online, where do I sign up? none of us really knew what online meant in 1997, and my faculty was as skeptical as yours at the time. But there were people who were committed to giving it a try. Get the right vision, communicate for buy-in, communicate, empower action, create short-term wins, don't let up, make it stick. And in the book, he really talks about embedding it in the culture. Good to Great is all about disciplined people, disciplined thought, disciplined action. Greatness is, I think, within all of us. But it's going to take strategy. It's going to take execution. You're going to have to go all in. But the potential rewards, not as great as they were in 97. It is a much more crowded market. It's much more competitive. The cost of student acquisition is much higher. But you've got great potential, and you've got a great conference here to learn how to do it. And I urge you to go all in. But again, it's going to take guts. There will be naysayers. There will be resistors. You have to listen respectfully. You have to explain your position, but if you're in a leadership position, you have to make decisions and you have to execute. I wish you all well. I'm going to take Q&A until they cut me off or you leave yourselves and go on break. But if you can, come up to the microphone. If not, I understand that there are people who will hand you a microphone, but love to take some questions if you have any. I'm going to feel really awkward if somebody doesn't ask a question.
So much. You're always so thoughtful. I appreciate it very, very much. We've been colleagues for a lot of years, so your success has been hard-earned, and I really have enormous respect for you. Quick question about diversifying your student population base. This isn't just, just about new technologies and so on. You also have had some internally have had to have some discussions about diversifying your various revenue base as well as your student population. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Part and parcel to inventing the private not-for-profit university of the future was to diversify that revenue base. And we're always looking for new opportunities. Our latest is a couple of corporate partnerships where we're actually located within the corporate facility in their training rooms. They're training rooms during the day. There are classrooms at night. But they're also accessible to people in the general area. But we have much like we had on military bases, we have this captured population, and the corporation is paying a portion of the tuition. We discount it based on the value of the space, and everybody wins. But we're always looking for other revenue streams. We went from just military and a couple community college campuses, added online, added what we call the standalone or office park locations, which we continue to add to. We added now the corporate partnerships and obviously seeking some more. The more revenue streams, I said at lunch, I sometimes describe myself as a mutual fund manager. I need to make certain that more are up than down, and if more are up than down, then at the very least I'm stable. So we knew we could take a hit when we changed out from a partnership arrangement for online to doing it all in-house because of those diverse revenue streams. If we were just campus and online, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So we need to find other and more diverse revenue streams, absolutely. And they're out there. They're in our neighborhoods. I know a school that shall remain nameless, but right down the street, a major engineering facility. A lot of their graduates working in it, and so they never talked to the people and that group brought in University of Phoenix to do an MBA for their engineers 5 miles from their campus. And then once it happened, they were, how could that happen? Well, be thinking about what that customer needs and cares about, and maybe it won't. I have to think if that institution went and said, we'd love to bring it here or do something directly with you, that they would be there, and instead they will. And this is a fairly remote, little city, a long way from anything, that Phoenix saw an opportunity and jumped in. So be looking in your own neighborhoods. I mean, they're not all somewhere else. Some of them are right under our noses. Yes?
I think I can throw my voice on. My question is regarding faculty. You increased your faculty full-time. Do you also have adjuncts as part of your business model? And if so, how does that fit with compensation for adjuncts versus full-time?
We have a lot of adjuncts. We couldn't survive with them. And some of them have been with us for almost since we started military higher education, which was in 1973. In fact, there's a surgeon in Virginia who's taught for us for 35 years. And the guy is absolutely wonderful, teaches science, obviously, but he takes the students on field trips on Saturday and so forth. So we not only have them, we value them. Our adjuncts have gotten salary increases every single year for the last 5 years. Depending on their service, they also get dependent tuition remission for a longer service. 25% of all of our faculty have classroom evaluations every year, full and part-time. They are participants in all of our faculty development programs. They are a part of our university senate, which meets on campus twice a year, and we fly them in both for that, and we have faculty development at the same time. But an adjunct in California could say, I want to go to that using more technology in the traditional classroom session on campus. And if they raise their hand, we'll fly them in to do that. So we have them, we depend on them, we value them tremendously, and we try and show them that. And frankly, the fact that we give them training, the fact that we evaluate them and give them feedback and so forth, is a differentiating characteristic. They tell us that all the time. I feel valued here because you'll invest in me and you care what I actually do. So even places that are paying more, they don't feel, they feel like a vagabond that just comes and goes and nobody cares. We have a full-time person whose only job is the care and feeding and communication with adjuncts, surveying them in terms of what their needs are in terms of professional development, et cetera, and so forth. One more question. There must be something really good at that break. There, and back.
I'm an investment guy, so I tend to think of things like stocks. If I looked at SLU as a ticker, and you laid out this eloquent presentation of why you have been successful up until this point, you also laid out this increased dynamic of marginal cost of supplies collapsing, you have this increased elasticity of demand, students are questioning return on educational investment. The landscape has definitely changed in the 5-year period, 08, when independent on to today. Your presentation didn't really touch on any of these because you don't want to tell everyone in the room, a competitor potentially, what you plan to do, but how as an institution are you going to differentiate yourself for the new environment which we're in today? You mentioned corporate partnerships, which is certainly something very interesting, but what else are you doing?
Well, I did mention MOOCs, and I talked about brand extension, and I'm not certain we're going to do it, but one of the things we're working on a plan to offer one in Catholic theology. It would be free and all of that stuff, and our notion is brand extension. If we could get 10,000 Catholics, mostly Catholics, to take a course in Catholic theology, and it costs us $50,000 to do that, and we extend our brand for $5 a person, that would be a winner for us. So we're looking certainly at things like that. And you know, my board members say all the time, why do you go out and speak at these conferences? Aren't you going to give your competitors some advantage? And so that's how we do things in higher ed. But within our online courses, we've been working very, very hard on adaptive learning technologies, delivering the courses based on an individual's learning style. Looking at, we've identified what courses are really barriers to success. They tend to be things like math and accounting, and for someone out of school a long time, they're afraid already, and then they run into problems, and then they just quit, period. Not the course, but the whole. We're doing the analytics in terms of what courses not to offer early on, so people can learn how to learn online before they hit one of the courses that we know statistically that they're going to have trouble with. Some of it is just getting smarter about what we do and how we do things. I was talking at lunch, we've got a office of analytics in terms of getting very sophisticated about where we open new locations, what programs we offer in those locations, those kinds of things. So we're trying to get better at executing everything, as well as looking for new opportunities like the corporate partnerships. That's a short version of it.
Do you think you'll grow prospectively?
Yes, and we don't have a desire to grow in leaps and bounds. We kind of like nice, incremental, solid, year in, year out growth in all of our lines of business, and that's what we strive for, and by and large have been succeeding. Now, military's been down a little because the wars are winding down. The branches are reducing their number of servicemen and women. That's affecting us, but we're compensating elsewhere. But yes, we think that there is more growth potential. Unfortunately, people have to be honest. I think it's at some of your expense. If we out-execute you and out-market you and do everything better, and we know this is happening already, both in traditional and non-traditional, we'll gain market share. And so, yes.
And just last question, you identified obviously some challenges for the industry, for your institution overall. Could you rank what worries you most in terms of some of these secular shifts and some of the headwinds the industry now faces?
I'm not sure I understood. Rank the biggest challenge?
Yeah, I mean, you sit here and say, well, again, you can say, well, MOOCs are both an opportunity and a threat. Tuition's being cut in dramatic ways.
I think our price points, particularly, well, there are two places where our price points are under a lot of pressure and I think are going to give to that pressure, and that's the traditional residential campus and online. The price pressures are increasing there, and I think that's a major threat.
Thank you.
Dr. Kirk, thank you very much.